Hey everyone, it's Jackie Weeb. Thank you for tuning into the Weeb Evangelism Podcast. I want to continue talking a little bit more about something I started in last week's episode, just from a little bit of a different angle, but basically it's that natural things matter too. And God created both the natural and the spiritual, and He intended for those two to really work together. And the thing about it is, we often kind of try to separate them. And while you can kind of do that to a degree in some ways, and it can be helpful to make the distinction at times, the truth is that they're kind of inseparable, honestly. And the thing about it is, God created both of them. And so I think it would benefit us if we would really ask, okay, what is the purpose of this? As far as the natural goes, I think a lot of times the body of Christ, as faith people, we can err in over spiritualizing things, and we can sometimes, get too much as though, well, natural things, that's not spiritual, so I don't need to pay any attention to that. I don't want to, really consider the natural because that's not really spiritual. And the thing about it is, yes, there is a divine order, and we're not supposed to only pay attention to natural things. The spiritual side of things is definitely more weighty, and spiritual or supernatural, if you want to call it, can supersede natural, and very often we need it to. But that doesn't mean that we have to feel like it's unspiritual to expect the laws of nature that God Himself put into place to work the way He designed them to work. That's not unspiritual to expect that. Think about the law of gravity. You can act like, well, that's a natural thing. I don't need to pay attention to that. But if you don't pay attention to that, you ain't going to be here long. So I want to read to you out of Daniel, because this is such a good example of how both the natural and the spiritual really are necessary. We need to be paying attention to both. And what's interesting to me is in Daniel, I'm going to read in chapter 1, verse 4 here. And this is talking about whenever Nebuchadnezzar was looking for people to serve in the palace. And of course, Israel's people had gone into captivity. So this is basically saying what his requirements were, Nebuchadnezzar's requirements. Youths in whom was no defect, who were good looking, showing intelligence in every branch of wisdom, endowed with understanding and discerning knowledge, and who had ability for serving in the king's court. And he ordered him to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. And then in verse 5, they should be educated 3 years, at the end of which they were to enter the king's personal service. So what's so interesting to me is you think about Daniel getting into that palace, but the requirements were purely natural. King Nebuchadnezzar was not a spiritual man, in tune with God, who was looking for spiritual giants to serve him. His criteria was natural things. And so it was Daniel, and then of his friends, of course, too. And then verse 17 says, as for these 4 youths, Daniel and his friends, God gave them knowledge and intelligence in every branch of literature and wisdom. Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams. So immediately you see, okay, of course, God is the source, even of their natural intelligence, even of their natural ability. He is the source. But you also see that there was spiritual mixed in as well in the same verse. So there was natural and spiritual. But the king's criteria was natural. So these guys, even though it was God who gave them that He gave them the skill and the knowledge and the wisdom and the intellect. But these weren't just spiritual attributes that, only were happening in the spiritual realm. Like these guys, they had to put pen to paper. They had to eat healthy. They had to be fit. They had to pick up a book and study. They had to do all of these natural things in order to be qualified in the king's eyes. It wasn't just, oh, you're a spiritual giant and you can understand, dreams and visions. The king didn't even know that yet at that point. And so it's such a good example of that, we have to embrace and develop the natural things and gifts that God has given, because clearly that comes from God too. And we have to develop those as well and embrace those as well if we really want to be able to go as far in this life as he would have us go. Like, what if Daniel had been like, just being sloppy in the natural? He would have not gotten where he went, and God would not have been able to use him the way that he did. And even though that wasn't all right always visible, and he couldn't see what was going to happen just because, he was being excellent in natural things, but he didn't see at the beginning where that was going to take him. And yet it was so important. And another example is the story of Gideon in Judges 6 and 7. So, God had Gideon gather an army to fight the enemy. And so he had 32,000 men summoned. And then, God brought that number just down to 300. But then you have to think, okay, what was this culling process based off of? And so the first sifting, the first cull, if you will, it seemed to be more of a spiritual matter because it had to do with fear. He said, those who are fearful go home. So after that one, it was 10,000 that remained. And there was another test to pass. And, there may be multiple reasons why God had them do this, or, there's maybe some spiritual insight on that as well. But I once heard someone talk about this. So the thing was, the second test was that the guys that were left, they got to a water source to drink. And God told Gideon that everybody who would kneel down to drink, they were supposed to go home. But everyone who brought the water up to their mouth, instead of kneeling down and bending down to drink, they were the ones that were going to be staying. And I heard someone once talk about this as in, if they bent all the way down into the water, lowered themselves to the water to drink, they were not as aware of their natural surroundings. They could be caught off guard more easily. And this, again, was a natural thing. How aware are they? How alert are they? And how on guard are they? How do they deal with natural? How do they process this in their mind and, apply wisdom? And so the thing about it is, the 10,000 that remained after that first cut that had to do with fear, they could have been like kind of prideful and arrogant and been like, oh yeah, we're not scared, we're staying. But then they still got cut. Most of them still got cut because of something natural. And so there's just over and over, we can see that it really does matter that we pay attention to both natural and spiritual. I think so often us faith people may act like natural things, even, for example, how our bodies work, what our bodies need to operate and function the way that God designed them to. But that these natural things are just too trivial and too petty and too insignificant to really pay much attention to. But doesn't the Bible say that he who is faithful in a little thing will also be faithful in big things? And so what do we reveal about our hearts or what we truly believe if we act like, we refuse to educate ourselves in these natural things and natural laws that God put in place, or if we refuse to develop an excellence in the natural gifts and talents that God has given us? And because if we think the natural things are so small and insignificant, well, don't we want to follow the word that says that he who is faithful in the little things will be faithful? Don't we want to be given more? And don't we want to be trusted with the greater, more spiritual things in our own words? That's greater and more spiritual, right? By our own actions, that's what we're saying. And so I think that often the natural things are a testing ground of sorts to see if you'll be faithful in the little things, in the things that seem more insignificant, and so that you can be trusted in greater, weightier things. But the point is, don't underestimate what the natural side of things can do, and not to isolate it to just natural. You know, I've seen people who seem to be doing everything right in the natural, you know, and still they are lacking something if they don't include the spiritual. We all know that. They may be doing good in their health, they may be doing good in finances, they may be doing good in their career or their gifts, their talents, whatever they have been given by God, but they're still not happy. They're still not fulfilled. There's something lacking spiritually. And so they're not well-rounded. But then we have the other side where you can have believers and they are strong believers, spirit-filled believers. They have a close relationship with the Lord and they are spiritually fulfilled, but yet they are lacking in areas. Maybe they're not taking care of their body. Maybe there's a natural gift that God has given them that they've never developed or grown in excellence in because they don't think that that's really important, because it doesn't seem like a very spiritual thing. But I just want to challenge you to really look at, what did God create? And if he created this, then what is the purpose of it in my life? How do I apply it? And, you know, when we're well-rounded, when we embrace all things that come from God, which includes natural and spiritual, that's when we ultimately will have the best outcomes in life, the best results, when we are making choices that align with that. So I just want to leave that with you. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. I'm Jackie with Weeb Evangelism, and Peter and I want you to know how your seed is making an impact in people's lives, whether it's in the area of prisons and jails, street ministry, providing support to expecting moms in need, or books, or traveling ministry. One of the best ways that you can stay up to date with what we're doing in any of these areas, and really just stay in the know of what's going on around here, is by signing up for emails on our website, which is weebevangelism.com. We also want to give you the opportunity that if God is putting it in your heart to partner with us and help send us, you know, maybe you can't go yourself, and maybe you're not called to go, but you do want to send. You can also find all the giving options and information right there on the website as well. You know, we are so thankful for people like you that really, you just love other people so much that you want to be a part of them being reached, them being touched, being rescued by the love of God and by the power of his word. And so we thank you and we love you, and we are really looking forward to every good thing that God has just ahead for each one of us.